Hey folks, it's Nate. Thanks for joining me once again as we look to the horizon. And today I'm back with another writing vlog, and I am happy to report that this week went pretty much like I expected to, but a little bit better. I did finish the first chapter of the Gospel According to Earth. It is much longer than I expected it to be. It's over 3,000 words, which is a bit long for chapters of stories I usually put on my blog. I usually shoot for about 2,000 to 2,500 words on those chapters, sometimes coming in a little bit under that, depending on where the natural story break is. But in this story, I had a little bit more that I wanted to get through in the opening chapter, and it wound up being a little bit long. Not really an issue, other than that it did eat up more time than I would have liked. And as a result, all I was really able to do writing wise was finish that chapter. And I wrote a new essay because I recently picked up a book, specifically The Truth and Beauty by Andrew Klavan, which I wanted to give a full review of, and I wanted to do it while it was fresh in my mind. So rather than put off a review of this until my next batch of essays, I decided to draft it right away and then edit it as I have time to ruminate on the subject. So I've written that review as well. And I want to talk about this book because it was a very interesting case study in how a talented author can write a book that is really solid and has no real flaws, but is still not a great book. And what I mean by that is early on in here, and this is something I've been mentioning to just about everyone who's asked for my thoughts on this book. Early on, Klavan says, this is a good book. Well, no, he tells a story. He was talking to his wife who had just read the first, or at least an early draft of the manuscript, and he said she found it very interesting, but she wasn't sure it was a good book, to which Klavan replied, of course it's a good book. I just have to cut out all the bad parts. And he seems to have done that. There isn't really anything bad in this book. It is very interesting. It's very engaging. It grapples with a lot of very heady ideas. But I think he cut out too much. I think some of the bad parts that he cut out probably needed to be polished up and left in. They needed to be brought up to the level of the rest of the book because I feel like it's missing some connective tissue between the ideas that he's trying to grapple with. This is largely meditation on the Romantic English poets and how the ways they use their poetry to grapple with their time period reflect both the Gospels and the modern day. And I think in this book he does a pretty good job showing how the Romantics were grappling with the same problems that we have today. I don't think he does quite as good a job of showing how these ideas relate back to the Gospel in any but the broadest senses. Now, I don't talk a whole lot about this on this channel specifically because this is largely about my writing process, but I am a pretty devout Christian. I've done a lot of Bible study. I've done a lot of contemplation. I studied philosophy, and I try and apply those techniques to Christianity, although I recognize that there's more to Christianity than just philosophy. And through all of these lenses, I think that all of Klavan's theses in here are correct. He talks about how Christianity requires us to both authentically believe a thing and also play out the role of the thing. He talks about the need for authenticity as well as the need for performance and how the two become unified in the story of Christ. And actually, I think the best job he does connecting the ideas of literature and poetry to the ideas of the Gospels when he relates Hamlet to Christ. And he talks about how Hamlet is both an actor and an authentic person by the end of his story. He is both the play Hamlet and he is Hamlet himself. And I actually did, in college, I did a presentation on Chinese wisdom literature and the Proverbs and parables of Christ, which I feel have a lot of similar themes to them, where they are trying to unite a story with a principle, and how Christ is ultimately, that self-same thing. Anyways, without delving too deep into the theology and philosophy of this, The Truth and Beauty is grappling with all of those ideas and grappling with it in a very authentic way. It's also grappling with the Romantic poets, Byron, Keats, Wordsworth, Milton, Blake, and in addition to Byron, Shelley, both, what is his name? James John Shelley and Mary Shelley, both together. And he looks at these things through the lens of the time period and a little bit of the biblical principles that he feels the authors were reaching for, although they didn't necessarily realize it. But there's some connecting tissue between those two points that is, I think, missing. He talks repeatedly, for example, about how Wordsworth left his radical ways behind and came back to more conservative opinions later in life. But he doesn't really, I feel like, draw those connections from the poetry of Wordsworth's early days to the thoughts and correspondence he had later on. I'm not really that familiar with the poet, so I don't know if Wordsworth had any work that he did in that time period that would relate to this topic. Anyways, all of this is kind of a rambling overview of the things I intend to discuss once I have the post on this live. What I think is really interesting about this is that, unlike a lot of writers, and one of the reasons I really like him is Klavan is interested in fiction, both as fiction and fiction as something that we apply, not as an allegory for, but as something we apply in life. That practical working nature of fiction is I think what sets a good popular writer apart from a very academic or a very heady writer. There are a lot of people who have ideas that they put in fiction which they never apply in real life. They never even try to apply. But they think it would be good if the world was kind of like this somehow, some way. And it is, I think, that idea of applying fiction that has really appealed to me from what I've read of Klavan's work. He's clearly trying to do that here. I just think maybe he's a step short of it. Anyways, that's why I was just really excited to write something about this, because I think it's a good idea, but I think it's an incomplete idea. And I hope you will look forward to seeing it. Unfortunately, because finishing this book and recording my thoughts on it ate up, and on top of that, the unexpected length of the first chapter of The Gospel According to Earth, I was not able to work on anything else this week. So I do have a pretty good output, I think, and I hope you will enjoy reading it. But I got extra stuff done, but it wasn't the extra stuff I had hoped to do at the beginning of the week. And that happens sometimes. I mean, that's just... You will often have ideas that it's best to put on the back burner and wait for an opportune moment to begin developing. But some things, especially things that are very immediate. This book just came out. This video is going to go up, I think, 2.5 weeks after its release date, and my text review will probably come out a month after it does. And that is a good window for commentary on something very new and very relevant. The alternative would have been to wait until I was done with The Gospel According to Earth, which would be sometime in September or October, I believe, and then post my thoughts on the book, which, I mean, you can do that, but it's not really the right time to go back and look at something. I guess I could have done like a year-end fiction retrospective. That would have been maybe an appropriate time. But I think that doing this now is the best time period, because among my readers, you are most likely to be able to use this as useful information when deciding whether to buy this book or not. I'm not sure I recommend buying it, because I would check it out of your library, but it is, like I said, it feels like a very incomplete book, as if there's some connective tissue in here that got cut on the cutting room floor and never put back in. So, yeah, hopefully that was an interesting rant to hear me go on, because it is what consumed most of my mind and most of my writing time this week. Next week, I still have theater performances to do, but I think only half of a chapter of chapter 2, The Gospel According to Earth, needs to get done. So I'm going to do half a chapter, and then I'm going to try and get back to putting that new text that I want to get done into Burning Bright. And that will be, those two things are going to be my focus for this week. And I know that I had a focus laid out for last week, and I kind of ignored part of it. But I justified that to myself a little bit with the assumption that working on Burning Bright was going to be a bonus. And I got a different bonus by working on this, which gives me, another week of content to think about, to post on the blog before The Gospel According to Earth goes live. So in some ways, I bought myself a little time. But overall, yes, next week, at least some of the new content for Burning Bright needs to get written, as well as some more of The Gospel According to Earth. So those are the goals for next week, and I will check in with you then to let you know how it's gone.